elf off the shelf. It was 4:35 on Christmas morning, and Jason tossed and turned in his race car bed. The 6-year-old boy couldn't sleep. And how could he? There were presents to open downstairs. Jason turned to his side and curled up under his blanket. Instead of sleeping, he watched the snow fall outside his window. It was still dark out, but the streetlights provided a picturesque view of the falling snow. Jason wanted nothing more than to wake his mom and dad so they could see what Santa left them. But his parents specifically told him not to leave his room until they woke him up. They said Santa didn't like nosy children, and to keep his distance. Jason was acting up so much this year that Santa sent them an elf to keep watch over the boy. His mother brought the small elf puppet home one day and said that if Jason ever woke up and the elf was in a different spot, it meant the elf had reported back to Santa. Jason cleaned up his act immediately and always made sure to be polite in the family room when the elf was in earshot. The little boy tried to make up for his naughty ways and was recently going above and beyond please and thank yous for anyone in sight. Jason was confident he had moved up the rankings on Santa's nice list, and he even left milk and cookies on the fireplace mantel just to seal the deal. Jason was happy they had a fireplace, making their home as Santa-friendly as possible. Jason didn't know how Santa visited homes without fireplaces and didn't want to know. Jason couldn't get back to sleep. His mind was on Santa. Several weeks ago, an airplane crashed into a house across town, and Jason's father quipped, "Looks like Santa showed up a bit early." Jason's dad had a good laugh, but Jason had been concerned about Santa's well-being ever since. When Jason sent his Christmas list to Santa, he advised the big man on how to stay healthy. Jason had recently learned the importance of Band-Aids and Neosporin. But Santa had to be okay. Christmas couldn't be ruined. It just couldn't. A speck of light came over the horizon out his window, which meant it was morning. Jason convinced himself it was okay to get his parents up. He rolled out of bed and slid his little feet into his Star Wars Wookiee slippers Santa brought last year. He rolled out of bed, went to his bedroom window, and scanned the rooftops of the neighboring homes. The doe-eyed boy always wanted to get a glimpse of Santa sneaking off, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. The roofs were covered in beautiful soft snow, but Jason saw no boot or hoof-shaped footprints. "Santa hasn't even gotten here yet," he said. The boy pouted, but rationalized that Santa's magic abilities covered their footprints so no human eyes could detect them. "Clever Santa," Jason said. He stood too long at the frosty window, and a chill ran through the boy. He stepped back and almost wiped out after stepping on one of his race cars, but caught himself against his dresser. Jason reached up and opened his bedroom door. He peeked his little head out and saw the upstairs hallway was glowing with pretty reds and greens from the lit Christmas tree downstairs. Jason tiptoed down the hall, letting the festive colors wash over him. The small pajama-clad boy crept into his parents' room, and he could hear his dad snoring loudly. His mom and dad were under the covers, dead to the world. Jason cleared his throat in hopes of stirring them awake. It didn't work. He cleared his throat louder, and when that failed, he let out a big "Ho, ho, ho!" "Jason?" his mother asked, wiping her tired eyes. "Is everything okay? Is your tummy upset?" "My tummy is great," Jason said. his voice growing louder. "Because it's Christmas morning!" Jason's shouting jolted his father awake. "Oh, what's going on?" asked his dad. "Is there a fire?" The panicked man took a moment and collected his thoughts. He saw no fire or immediate danger, just his impatient son excited to open gifts on Christmas morning. "Are you for real right now, Jason?" "It's time to open presents," the boy said. "What time is it, Mary?" Jason's dad asked. "4:45, Mary said. "Go back to bed," the exhausted father said as he threw his pillow at Jason so hard it sent the kid flying back into the hallway. "Santa's not done delivering gifts until 6 a.m., Mary said. "What if we're one of the last stops? If we go down too soon and he hasn't come yet, he'll pass us right up. And do you know why?" "Because I was naughty," Jason said, knowing the answer. The little boy fought back tears as the guilt set in. Jason ran back into the room to hug his mom, who held him close. "You don't want to miss out on presents because you got greedy the night before, do you?" "No," Jason whispered, trying not to further annoy his father, who was already burritoed up in his blankets and snoring again. "Remember what Santa told you?" Mary asked her son about their recent trip to the Willow Ridge Mall, where Jason had met Santa himself. It was a life-changing experience for him. "Santa said that if I'm honest and true, good things will come." "That's right," Mary said. "And if you get back to sleep, Santa will come. He'll eat his cookies, drink his milk, and leave you everything you wanted under the tree, just like every year." "And if you don't go back to sleep," his father growled from under the covers. The tone in the man's voice meant Jason better get out of there and back to sleep. Jason hugged his mom and ran out, gently closing their door behind him. The red and green lights washed over the boy again as he shuffled back to his room. Jason flopped onto his bed and crawled under his Minecraft sheets. There was no way he could sleep. But what if being asleep was how Santa got in? What if Santa passed their house up because Jason was awake in his room blocking Santa's Christmas magic? "Santa wouldn't do that," he said as he watched the snow fall from his window. Jason thought back to his one-on-one with Santa at the mall. Santa asked Jason what he wanted for Christmas, but Jason had a question of his own. "What do you want for Christmas?" Jason asked. The bushy-haired man stammered, and his cheeks turned as red as his suit. Nobody has ever asked me that before," St. Nick said. Santa listened to what Jason wanted for Christmas, and afterward he talked with his mom for a few minutes, telling her what a special boy he had. Adults often called Jason special, but this time they said it in a good way. The day Jason met Santa was one he'd never forget, and he hoped that cozy memory would lull him to sleep. But sleep wasn't in the cards. Jason tossed and turned for a while, then looked back to his fortnight alarm clock. 4:57. Jason tried counting sheep, but that didn't work either. He tried taking deep breaths like his old camp counselor had taught him. Nothing worked. His mind returned to his father's words about the airplane crash. Was Santa really on that plane? The boy's little heart ached thinking of a world without Santa. Jason made up his mind to go downstairs and wait for Santa. Jason had to make sure his old friend was okay. and he also wanted one of the cookies they left on the mantel. But Jason didn't remember putting the milk and cookies on the mantel. His mother said she would, but Jason never saw her do it. What if she forgot? I have to go down there, Jason thought. If he didn't leave cookies out for Santa, he would be going against the sacred Christmas covenant. The rules were simple. If you left cookies out for Santa, he gave presents to the nice children. If not, you wouldn't even get coal come Christmas morning. Jason kicked off his sheets and hopped into his slippers. He snuck down the hallway, tiptoeing past his parents' room. He heard his father snoring, so he knew he was safe. Jason was a sneaky kid, a talent inherited from his father. The two would sneak up on Jason's mom and scare her. She wasn't a fan of that game. When Jason reached the stairs, he peeked through the balcony posts and saw no presents under the 8-foot tree on the first floor below. Santa hadn't come yet, so Jason had time to leave out milk and cookies. Before creeping down the stairs, Jason looked for the elf his mother had put on the shelf. The lights from the Christmas tree lit the shelf up, and Jason could see clearly that the elf wasn't there. Where is he? Jason asked himself from the top of the stairs. Then Jason saw the elf sitting on the coffee table in front of their leather sectional, its weasel-like face smiling off into the distance. The elf's leg dangled off the edge, his cute little green boots hanging down. Jason liked the elf's boots and red vest, but its beady black eyes scared him a little. Jason tiptoed down the stairs and kept his eyes on the elf the whole time. For a moment, Jason thought the black eyes turned toward him, but he wasn't quite sure. The boy picked up the pace, and in his hurry, almost knocked over his mother's chairside lamp. The lamp wobbled a bit, but Jason grabbed it before it fell. Whew, close one, he thought. A broken lamp was the last thing he needed before Santa arrived. Jason was already having too many naughty or nice close calls tonight. Next to the lamp was his dad's letter opener. Jason went to pick it up and pretend to use it as a sword, as he'd done many times before. But being naughty in front of the elf would have been a bad decision. Jason avoided the gaze of the Christmas elf and went straight to the kitchen. The cookie jar was on the counter, just out of Jason's reach. The 6-year-old grabbed one of the nearby dining chairs and dragged it over, causing a loud screeching noise against the tile. He listened for his mom or dad coming downstairs, but the dragging chair wasn't enough to wake them. The ceramic cookie jar contained just a handful of sugar cookies left, and Jason's mouth watered at the sight. He grabbed 2 paper plates, one for Santa and one for himself. He poured 2 glasses of almond milk. Jason chomped into his first cookie and almost ate the whole thing in one bite. He washed it down with his almond milk. Jason preferred real milk, but his mother was transitioning the house from regular milk to almond milk. Jason got used to it, but it just wasn't the same. Hopefully Santa would like it. Jason was sure he would. It was healthier and easier on the tummy, according to his mom. While Jason bit into a second cookie, he heard something from the family room. "Mom?" Jason said quietly before devouring the rest of the cookie. If he was going to be scolded, it would be with a stomach full of cookies. But nobody came in. "Dad?" Jason called out again. Still nothing. Then what was that noise, Jason thought? Was Santa here? Jason quickly cleaned up, throwing his plate away and tossing his glass in the sink. He grabbed Santa's cookies and milk, but on the way out, realized he didn't have a free hand to turn the light off. He steadied the plate of cookies on his head and balanced it there while he flipped the switch. Jason caught the plate of cookies just as it started to fall. The fireplace mantel was the traditional spot for Santa's offering, and as Jason approached, he looked up at the mantel where the Christmas elf now sat. The elf stared in Jason's direction. Frozen with fear, the little boy stood there, locking eyes with the 10-inch doll. "How did you get over here?" Jason asked the inanimate object. "You didn't go tell Santa anything, did you? I didn't mean to forget his milk and cookies. You didn't have to go tattle." Jason set the glass of milk next to the elf. "And don't drink the milk yourself. I'm on thin ice as it is." Jason placed the plate of sugar cookies on the far end of the mantel so the elf wouldn't get any wise ideas. "And don't think of taking even one cookie. Santa will know." Jason half expected the elf to respond, but it didn't. The boy studied the doll, its odd features, unlike the other elves he had seen in stores. Those dolls had kind, round eyes with puffy, soft limbs. This one was wiry and sharp, and Jason couldn't take his eyes off it. The puppet's chest expanded and contracted as if breathing. That was enough to spook Jason, who sprinted up the stairs. Once at the top, Jason looked to the family room below, his eyes darting to the fireplace. The milk and cookies were right where he had left them. The elf, however, was gone. Jason sneaked past his parents' closed door and returned to his room. He went to jump into bed and hide under the covers until his parents came to get him. But sitting on Jason's pillow was the elf. "What are you doing in here?" Jason asked. He almost called out for his parents, but didn't want to risk getting in trouble minutes before Santa arrived. The doll's black eyes stared straight ahead off into the distance. Jason stepped forward, mustering the courage to grab the elf and toss it from his bedroom. As Jason reached out to snatch the elf from his pillow, the Christmas elf's head turned and looked at Jason. "Naughty!" the elf said, its voice deep and raspy. "You're not supposed to be able to talk," Jason said. The elf slid down the pillow and walked to the edge of Jason's bed, eye level with the boy. "You're not supposed to be able to do that either," said Jason with a quiver. "I'm going to get Mom and Dad." But before Jason could move, the elf hopped down onto the floor. It took staggered, awkward steps toward Jason, who turned and grabbed the doorknob. The knob wouldn't budge, and Jason knew it was the elf using his magic. The elf snarled and ran towards Jason, but stepped on one of the 6-year-old's toy race cars and tripped on his weasel-like face. Jason saw his opportunity and kicked the elf with as much force as his little legs allowed. Jason expected the doll to fly across the room, but it latched onto his ankle instead. The elf stared up at him, its arms climbing up his leg. "Naughty!" the elf said again. Jason shook his leg, but the elf clamped on. Jason reached down, grabbed the elf, and tossed it against the dresser. Its limbs flopped around before ragdolling to the ground. The plush doll didn't move, and Jason's eyes focused on the puppet's chest and saw no signs of breathing. Jason avoided the race cars as he went over to the elf. He bent over to pick the doll up as its beady eyes turned to Jason. "Dirty room," the elf said, springing back to life. "Naughty!" Once again, the elf grabbed Jason's ankle. This time, Jason lost his balance and fell to the ground. The elf had a death grip on Jason's pajama leg and pulled the boy toward the window on the far side of the room. The elf had tremendous strength. However, it still walked wibbly-wobbly like the plush doll it was. The elf dragged Jason with one hand and used the other to gesture for the window to open. The window shot up, and snow blew into the bedroom. Jason shouted for help, but his voice came out as jingle bells jangling. The elf hopped to the windowsill, and Jason grabbed the side of his nightstand to avoid being taken further. However, the stuffed doll was too strong. Jason slipped his foot from his sock, leaving the elf dumbfounded on the windowsill. The stuffed puppet's fabric eyebrows furrowed before throwing the sock out the window into the snowy backyard below. Jason dashed to his door again, but this time it opened for him. He hurried down the hall and tried to open his parents' door, but they must have locked it. Jason shouted for them to wake up, but his voice only jingled softly. The 6-year-old ran into the red and green hall and sprinted to the stairs, his cry still coming out as jingle bells. Jason's ankle hurt more with every step down to the family room. The mantel was clear, the coffee table empty, and there was no sign of the elf anywhere. Jason limped towards the front door, but as he crossed the Christmas tree, the elf leaped from the decorated fur and climbed Jason's shoulders. "Naughty!" the elf bellowed as it wrapped its strong hands around Jason's neck. The elf tightened its grip on Jason's throat. The boy stumbled over to the end table and reached for the letter opener his parents always kept there. It was too far for Jason to get his hands on, but his mom's lamp wasn't. Jason bonked the elf with the lamp and scrambled free from its grip. The elf bounced off the end table onto the floor, taking the letter opener on the way down. Then, from the fireplace, there rose such a clatter. The ground rumbled, and ash shot out of it. Soot covered the entire room. Jason thought it looked like black snow. Only the red and green lights from the Christmas tree illuminated the room. Behind the elf, a prominent figure stepped out from the fireplace. Jason couldn't believe his eyes, nor the elf who ceased its attack. Standing in the living room was Santa Claus himself. He was bigger than Jason remembered from their meeting at the mall, and his suit seemed softer and more ornate. Behind Santa was his giant red velvet bag of presents. "Ho, ho, holy smokes!" said Santa, his jolly voice echoing through the family room. He stepped up to the elf, who dropped the letter opener immediately. "Grinsworth, what in the candy canes do you think you're doing?" Santa asked. St. Nick put his hands on his hips and looked at the chaos around him. "This is not what you're supposed to do," Santa said. And for the first time, the unnaturally large man noticed Jason. "And look what you've done to Jason. His little ankle is sprained. How will he run down to open presents with a banged-up ankle, Grinsworth? You answer me that. This was such a good night until now." The elf pointed to Jason aggressively, silently blaming Jason for the night's mishaps. The elf, frustrated at being reprimanded for Jason's naughty behavior, picked up the fallen letter opener and charged at the 6-year-old. "Leave Jason alone," Santa said, the disappointment thick in every word. The stuffed doll stopped in its tracks, obeying Santa's every command. "I'm so sorry about this," Santa said to Jason. Santa offered his giant hand to Jason, who took it. Once back to his feet, Jason saw that Santa's shiny red suit was clean of the black soot. Meanwhile, the ash covered Jason and the puppet head to toe. Santa rustled Jason's hair with a jolly smile, and under normal circumstances, Jason would be on cloud nine. Santa was standing right in front of him. Then Santa gave Jason a reassuring wink to let the boy know everything would be all right. The elf looked confused at the doting look Santa was giving the child. "Naughty," the elf said, pointing to Jason. "No," said Santa. "You are the one who's been naughty, Grinsworth." The elf looked at its guilty fabric hands, then at Santa. "Naughty," the elf said, this time referring to itself. The depressed plush doll plopped down on its butt and lowered its head while Santa pulled his velvet bag of gifts from the fireplace. As Santa untied the golden string and opened the sack, he was distracted by an aroma that took hold of him. Santa sniffed the air like a bloodhound. "Are those sugar cookies I smell?" Santa's nose guided him to the milk and cookies on the mantel. "I've had a couple thousand cookies tonight, but what's a few more?" Santa scarfed down a sugar cookie like it was nothing. "You've been a very good boy indeed, Jason. These are delicious." Jason was relieved that Santa liked the cookies. But when Saint Nick took a swig of the almond milk, he gagged and put the glass back on the mantel. "I think the milk is spoiled," said Santa. "It's almond milk," Jason said, a little embarrassed. "That explains it," Santa said, patting Jason on his little head. "It's the thought that counts." Santa tossed another cookie in his mouth before returning to his sack of presents. He opened the bag, and golden light streamed out. Santa hummed his favorite Christmas song and pulled out a wrapped gift about the size of a shoebox. The box looked light, but when the jolly red giant placed it on the coffee table, it landed with a mighty thud. "I know you probably don't feel like opening Christmas presents right now," said Santa. "But do open this one. Grinsworth is a good elf," Santa said. "Or at least he was. Grinsworth always took my naughty or nice lists seriously, but I never thought he would go to such lengths." Santa pointed to his velvet bag, and the ashamed elf flipped himself into it. Santa quickly tied the golden string and turned to Jason one last time. "Do open it," Santa said, looking over to the magical box on the table. Santa grabbed his bag and bent down to step into the fireplace. Santa disappeared in a puff of snow, evaporating into the void. Jason sat on the living room floor, alone and covered in soot. The clock on the wall read 5:56 a.m. He looked at Santa's gift on the coffee table. He grabbed the box to throw it against the wall, but the boy could barely lift it, let alone throw it. Jason dropped the box back on the coffee table, where it landed with another loud thud. "Fine," Jason said. The 6-year-old boy ripped off the gingerbread man wrapping paper to reveal a generic cardboard box, like an Amazon box without the labeling. Jason used his fingernails to peel the tape. He opened the flaps and looked inside. "Huh?" Jason managed to say, surprised by what was inside. Nothing. The box was empty. Jason looked closer. Maybe he missed something. But nope, Santa gave him an empty box. When Jason looked back up, he was back in his bedroom. His slippers were back on his feet, and his pajamas were no longer covered in soot. He stood over his bed looking down at the empty cardboard box. He looked at the clock on his nightstand. 4:35 a.m. He looked over to the dresser, where he broke the drawer handle after throwing the elf. The handle on the dresser was unbroken. Jason's heart raced as he ran out of his room, his ankle feeling just fine. Outside his parents' bedroom, he could hear his father snoring. Jason opened the door a crack and took a look. His mom snuggled up against her very much alive husband. "Merry Christmas," Jason whispered to his parents, not wanting to wake them. Jason closed the door and approached the balcony to look down at the living room below. The ash was gone, and there were presents under the tree. Most importantly, there was no elf on the fireplace or hiding in their noble fur. Santa had given Jason the greatest Christmas gift of all. "Thanks, Santa." Before heading back to bed, Jason grabbed the plate of half-eaten cookies and put them in the sink. He poured Santa a glass of real milk and put it on the mantel. Santa deserved that.